We begin the Gemara today on Daf Mem Vav, Amud Aleph, 8 lines down from the top of the Amud, Tani Tana. This is a Gemara continuing the discussion from before. There was a Mishnah on Daf Mem Hey, where the Gemara learned out from the Pasuk that if there's a mountain, a Horim, Gvois, that's being worshipped as Avoda Zara, it does not become Asur B'Hana. But then there was a machlekes regarding trees. A Sheira tree, that's Avoda Zara. So here there was a machlekes between Rabbi Yossi Galili or Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda and the Rabbanon. What was the tree planted for? If the tree was planted for Avoda Zara, it's definitely Asur. But if the tree was originally planted stam and then later was served as an Avoda Zara, here there was a machlekes between Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda and the Chachamim whether it's Asur or not. Okay, now the Gemara continues on this theme. Tani Tani Kamei Rav Sheshes. There was a Tana that taught the following brayse in front of Rav Sheshes. Ha'akum, ha'ivdimis ha'arim, goyim that are serving Avoda Zara, a mountain, or segvais, hills. Hey mutaren, those mountains and hills are still mutter to have a noah from. This is the halacha that everyone agrees to, that it's said in the Mishnah as well. And va'ivdeyem b'sayif. However, the guy that worshipped this Avoda Zara, he will be chayiv misa. And the misa of a guy is always with a sayif, a sword. So even though it's not itself going to be Asur B'Hana, but what he did though is serving Avoda Zara. So he's going to be chayiv misa. Then the Brisa says, "V'sazroim v'sayirakis." If the guy is worshipping a field where this thing's planted or vegetables, then hein asurin. Then they will become Asur B'Hana v'ivdeim b'sayif. And the guy that serves this Avoda Zara will be chayiv misa by a sword. So Amalei, Rav Sheshes said to this Tana that taught this Brisa in front of Rav Sheshes, the Amalacha mani. According to whose opinion does it say here in the Brayse that if it's plants or vegetables, that then it will be Asur B'Hana? Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda. So this follows Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda's opinion, because the Amar Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda said, Ilon shenatai ulubisayif avdai, a tree if it was originally planted not for Avoda Zara. And according to Rashi, we saw in Daf Mem Hey, Rashi says that means he threw a pit into the ground or seeds into the ground to plant. And ulubisayif avdai, later he served it as an Avoda Zara. So in such a case, Asur, the tree will still be Asur, even though it wasn't originally planted for Avoda Zara, but it's going to be Asur. That's what Rav Sheshes commented to this Tana and said, that's why the Brisa says here that the plants and the vegetables will be Asur.
Can it be Asur?
Oh, so the Gemara asks over here, V'loikma, why can't he just simply say that the case of this Brisa is Be'ilon? That's what we have in our Gemara, but the Bach says Bizroyim, because the Brisa speaks about plants, and Bizroyim Shazaran Mitchile Lekach, plants that were Lechatchile planted for Avoda Zara. So because, as the Gemara said before, this is what's called Tfisas Yad Adam. There's the action of the person. He planted it for the sake of Avoda Zara. And V'Rabbanan, and it's following the opinion of the Rabbanan. Everybody would agree when you planted L'chatchila l'shem Avoda Zara that the Zrayim that grow will be Asur B'Hana. So why do you have to say that it's a case that L'chatchila did not plant it for Avoda Zara and it's only going like Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda's opinion? So the Gemara explains, Lo yisal kadaitach. No, because you can't interpret the words of the Brisa this way. Because the Tani Dumye Dahar, when it brings the example of the Zrayim, that it is Asur, it's saying this as a second case, and it's a case which is compared, or it's similar to the case that it said before regarding a mountain. Mahar shalei notoi mitchila lekach, just like a mountain was not planted, wasn't created in the beginning for the sake of this Avoda Zara. Afai nami in the Sefer, when it says that there's the Zrayim that will become Asur, it's talking about a similar case. Shalei notoi mitchila lekach. It wasn't originally planted for Avoda Zara, and still it's Asur. Why is it Asur? Because according to Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda, when you later worship this plant, it then becomes Asur. Therefore, Rav Sheshes said that the Tana of this Brisa is not the Chachamim. So Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda. Itmar, we learned the following machlekes between the Amiroim. Avnei har shenidaldulu, rocks from a mountain that detached on their own. Nobody touched it; it just detached on its own. Question is, what's the halacha now? So the rule that we said here is that if it's something which is attached to the ground, and it's the way the Eibusha created it, then it doesn't become Asur B'Hana, even if you worship it as an Avoda Zara. Over here we're talking about these rocks that detached on their own. So Bnei Rab Chiya and Rab Yechanan, the children of Rab Chiya, which are Rab Yehuda and Chizkiya, or Yehuda and Chizkiya, They argued with Rabbi Yochanan about this. And Rabbi Yochanan, Chadomar, one of their opinions was that asurais. Then in such a case, it's going to be asur. Because this halacha that we're saying, that the horim and the gvois, if it's hills and it's mountains, you learn from the pasuk that it's not going to be asur. That's only if it's hills and mountains. So the rock itself, when it's in the mountain, but not when it's detached. In a case where it's detached, it will be asur. Another opinion is mutaris. That in a case where it's detached, it will be mutter. It will still be mutter. Just like when it's part of the mountain, it's mutter. Even after it's detached, it just happened naturally. Nobody detached it. If it had just happened on its own, it still is included in what the pasuk says, that the hills and the mountains do not become asur no. So it's still going to be mutter. So just to clarify, this ibaya is all in the case where the rocks were detached on their own. But if somebody banged it or detached it with a tfisas yad adam, a person went and detached it, then it's going to become asur if you serve it as an Avoda Zara. And it doesn't matter if the person that detached it did it l'shem Avoda Zara or did not do it l'shem Avoda Zara, because once a human being went ahead and detached it, then it's no different than any other movable item which is fashioned by a human being, and a movable item that served as an Avoda Zara will be asur. Here the machlokes is in a case where it just detached on its own. And now the question is, does it still have its previous status of being part of the mountain, and it's going to be mutter bahana, or now that it's detached, it becomes like a movable item, and it's not included in that heter, and it'll be asur. So the Gemara explains, my time with the mandama mutaris. What's the reasoning of the opinion that says that it's mutter? Because kahar, we still compare it to a mountain. Mahar she'em betfisas yidei adam, just like the mountain, it's mutter, and there's no action of a person that created this, mutter, and therefore it's mutter. Af hani she'em betfisas yidei adam umutarin. So too, these rocks that detached on their own, there's no involvement of a person in this, so it's also mutter. So we compare it to the mountain itself. Okay, but the Gemara asks, how could you compare? True, the person that was not involved with is another thing here, that it's actually connected to the ground. But over here, though, it's detached. So maybe if it's detached, its status changes. How do you know to learn out from there? Says the Gemara, Behemeh tochiach. I can prove you this point from a behemeh. So this wasn't mentioned in the Gemara up until this point, but as Rashi brings here, that by a behemeh, a similar halacha applies, that if someone worships a behemeh as an Avoda Zara, then it's not going to asur the behemeh bahana. And what's the proof for this? Because when it comes to karbanis, there's a special pasuk that says that you learn from there that a nevat, a behemah that was served as Avoda Zara, cannot be brought as a carbon. If it's something which is asur bahana, because it's served as an Avoda Zara, what do you need a special pasuk for? There's b'chlal the halacha that anything that's asur bahana cannot be brought as a carbon. Rashi brings the source. It says in the pasuk mimashke Yisrael has to be something that's permitted to use. So the fact that you need a special drasha to asur a behemah worshipped as Avoda Zara for a carbon means that otherwise any person is allowed to have enough from this behemah. And that's what happened when the Yidden were in Mitzrayim. They took the sheep from the Mitzrayim that they were serving as an Avoda Zara, and they were bringing it, they were using it, and it was mutter ba'ana. Over there, actually, they were bringing it as a carbon. So I'm not exactly sure how that worked, but they took their Avoda Zara. Okay, so this is the raya the Gemara is now bringing from the behemah, that behemah techiach, by a behemah you see that it's mutter bahana even after it's served as an Avoda Zara, and it's something which is detached. It's not mechuber. So the same with a rock that detached from the mountain will also be mutter. But so the Gemara asks, but you can't learn out from behemah. By a behemah, I could say the reason why it's mutter ba'ano is because it has a unique quality, that it's a living being, it's a significant thing for itself, and someone that worships it as an Avoda Zara cannot change its status and will still be mutter. But how could you compare that to a rock that detached from a mountain? So I go back and say, I can prove from a mountain, which is not a living being, and there the Torah says that it's going to be mutter ba'ano. But I can't learn out from each one alone, because if I learn out from one of these, I have a svara to say that it's not compared, and therefore we learn from a tzad hashove, and this is as follows: Chazar adin, our attempt to learn from one or from the other alone goes back and forth. You can't learn from each one alone. The unique stringency, or the unique reason, actually, the unique reason to say that it's mutter ba'ana that I find by one is not the same as the reason that I find by another. And therefore what that proves to me is that this reason is not the cause of the din that it's mutter ba'ana. So rather, what is the cause of the din that I find by both of them? That's Hatzad HaShav Shebeh. And when I find an equal thing, the common denominator of the two, so then I say, then that is She'ein Be'em Tfisis Yidei Adam, whether it's the animal, whether it's the mountain, they're both mutter ba'ano, and there's no involvement, the person doesn't create this at all, mutter, and that this is mutter ba'ano, even after it served as an Avoda Zara. Of course, I could compare and say that in any other case as well, She'ein Be'em Tfisis Yidei Adam, mutter. So I saw a rock that detached from a mountain, but there's no tfisa of the action of the person, and therefore it'll also be mutter. So I'm learning it from a tzad shave of these two, behema and the mountain. But there's something unique about these two that you can't compare to that rock that detached from the mountain, because these two they are unchanged from the way they were when Eibusha created them. Over here, though, this rock, there's no tfisas yad adam, but it detached from its original natural place that it was when Hashem created it. So how could you compare? So the Gemara adds a detail. Elo asya mebehemes balas mum umehar. You can compare and learn from a behemoth that has a blemish and a mountain. So here this behemoth that has a blemish is not in its natural condition as it was born without a blemish. And therefore, I see by these two that it's mutter. And so I can learn out from the rock that detached. And here you can't ask that it's because we're talking about a behemoth that's a balmum. Or v'inami, another option, I could learn out me behemoth tama, even from a animal that is pure or complete without a mum. And umeilon yavish, and from a tree that's not anymore in its natural state, but from a tree that dried up. And so after the tree dries up, now this regarding the tree, this already is dependent in the machlokes before that we mentioned between Chachamim and Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Yehuda, exactly when a tree is still mutter b'hana, whether it was planted stam or. But the point is that we see by a tree as well that it'll be mutter, and we're talking about a tree that dried up, so it's not in its natural state as it was, and therefore you can learn out from there. Okay, so we have a clear limud for a rock that detaches from a mountain, that it's going to be mutter b'hana. Now, Oman da'asar. So what's the explanation of the other opinion that says that by the rock that detaches from a mountain, it's still going to be asar? So he says there's a unique limud by Avoda Zara, unique chumrah. Lahachik siv, the pasuk by Avoda Zara says, shakes to shaktzenu v'saif to savenu, that it should be disgraceful and abominable in your eyes. What is the pasuk adding with this? That the afagav the asi medina le'atayra, that when it comes to Avoda Zara, if it's not something that's written in the Torah explicitly that it's mutter, and you're just trying to expound from a limud to compare and to learn out that it would be mutter, light tasye. Do not learn out from there. Do not learn this limud. In other words, this pasuk is teaching me actually a general concept, not only regarding this case. That by Avoda Zara, when there's limudim to compare, like it's here, the binyanav, kavachayimar, tzadashava, whatever it may be, you can only learn these limudim if it's going to be l'chumra. Anytime you have a limud that you want to learn l'kula, you don't learn out. Yet for a kula, you need an explicit pasuk. That's what the Torah is adding by this. Now, the Gemara says to Stayim, I'll bring you a proof. The Bnei Rab Chiya, the Sharu, that it was the children of Rab Chiya, they were the ones that said that in this case of this rock that detached from the mountain, that it's mutter. Because the boy Chizkiya, which was one of the sons of Rab Chiya, asked the following shaila: Zokav beitzel lishtachvis law. A person takes an egg and stands it in a position to prepare it in order to use it to bow as an Avoda Zara. Mahu, what's going to be the halacha with this egg? Will it become asr b'hana because of this or not? Okay, so now it's not exactly clear what was the case of the ibaya that he asks. So the Gemara explains what the thinking at this point is. What was the case? So at this point we think to say that his shaila was as follows: that lishtach visla, he prepared this egg that it should be bowed down to as an Avoda Zara, and lishtach v'lo, and it was actually used as an Avoda Zara. And what's his shaila? The shaila is hai zikifasa. This, that he just put it in a position, he stood it up in a position. The Hava Maisa, is that considered to be a significant enough of an action that it was designated for Avoda Zara? Or he lo Hava Maisa? Or it's not considered to be a significant action to be served as an Avoda Zara, and therefore will not become Asur B'Hana. That's how they understood the Ibaya of Chiyah. Now, if that's the case, what can we learn from this? That if he did not stand it up in a position designating it for Avoda Zara, it's just an egg as is. and he went and bowed down to it, loy mitzvah, it would not become aser. So what do we see from here? Shema mina b'nei Rab Chiya d'sharu. So I can learn from here that the same thing would be regarding a rock that detached from the mountain, that Chizkiah and also his brother Yehuda, the sons of Rab Chiya, they say that would be mutter, because it's basically the exact same concept. Just like a rock that detaches from a mountain, it's the way the Eibusha created naturally this rock. It did detach, but there's no tfisas yad adam. So it's this rock, but now it's detached, meaning it's already in a movable item. But it's detached from the mountain, nothing else. An egg is a similar thing. An egg, the Eibusha created this egg, and the egg is sitting there on the table, and someone bows to it, someone serves it as an Avoda Zara. So in this case, we see that Chizkiah held that it would be it definitely would be mutter. So just like the egg in this state would be mutter, the same with the rock. We know now that Chizkiah holds it also would be mutter. Says the Gemara, it's not a proof that this is Chizkiah's opinion, because we misunderstood what his Ibaya is. Really, I can tell you, B'nei Rab Chiya the Asri. The children of Rab Chiya would hold a rock that detached from the mountain would be Asr. And the same with this egg, even if you do nothing, it's just sitting on the table and someone bows to it and serves it as an Avoda Zara, then it'll become Asr. And therefore, the Bachir says, if you bow to this egg without doing anything, afagav deloy zakfa, you didn't put it in a position for Avoda Zara, asura, it'll become Asr. So now, what was the Ibaya of Chizkiah in this case regarding this egg? The case over here is he positioned and prepared the egg in order to bow down to it. He prepared it for an Avoda Zara, but it never was actually used. He never actually served it as an Avoda Zara. So the shaila is regarding a case where it was never actually used for an Avoda Zara. So this is a whole different case. It has no connection to what we're talking about over here, which is when you have something that was served as an Avoda Zara, like the rock detached from a mountain or this egg. Here, he just prepared the egg for an Avoda Zara, but it was never bowed down to. That was the shaila of Chizkiah.
What's the shaila?
Oh, so what's the basis of his shaila? Oh, so here, what is actually going to bring that basically this kind of a case is a machlekes later in the Gemara here, in this Perek, there's a machlekes between Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Shmuel about such a kind of thing. As the Gemara brings here now, what happens if a Yid prepares an Avoda Zara, but he never actually uses it for an Avoda Zara? Does that Avoda Zara that the Yid prepare become right away Asr B'Hana, or only after he actually worships it as Avoda Zara? So this is actually a machlekes. So if so, the shaila is, what was Chizkiah's Ibaya? The Tanaim argued about this already. So the Gemara says, Uleman, according to who did Chizkiah have this shaila? According to the opinion that says that an Avoda Zara that's prepared becomes Asr immediately, so then Asura. You prepare this egg, so then it becomes Asr right away. And according to the opinion that says that it only becomes Asr when it's actually worshipped as an Avoda Zara, so the Holy Palcha, this egg that he put in a position to serve as an Avoda Zara, but it wasn't yet. So therefore it should be mutter. So what was the Ibaya of Chizkiah? According to this interpretation. So the Gemara says there's another detail to the story which explains his Ibaya. So it's not needed. This Ibaya is only in the following case. He positioned his egg in order to bow to it. Okay, but then he did not yet bow to it. But then what happened is now a guy came along and he bowed down to this egg. So the shaila is this egg going to become Asr now? Okay, so now Rashi here explains, usually the klal is that that someone else is bowing down to something that belongs to you. He can't answer something that doesn't belong to him. It belongs to you. He doesn't have a power to answer that. The guy comes and bows down to this egg that the Yid put in a position for Avoda Zara. How could the guy answer it? Okay, but there's a svara here though that the guy still could answer this. Why? As the Gemara brings the source for this. Rav Yudah said in the name of Shmuel that Yisrael shezokaf leveina, a Yid that puts a brick, he stands it up, not in its regular position. He stands it up in the position that it's now tall, in order to use it as an Avoda Zara, to bow to it. And the guy comes along and he bows to it, asura. It becomes asa right away. And now what's the basis of this halacha? So Rashi says the basis of this halacha is because if the Yid put it into this position, the Yid was megale das. He revealed clearly his intent that he wants this to be used as an Avoda Zara. So now when the guy comes along, he doesn't wait, the guy chaps right away and he bows to it as an Avoda Zara. He's actually fulfilling the Yid's intent, and actually Rashi says goes so far that we consider what the guy did to be like a shlichus of the Yid. The Yid wanted him to do this for him. So here you can't apply the rule of ein adam isa davish ein shaloi, that you can't cause a issa to something that doesn't belong to this guy. The Yid expressed very clearly that he wants this to be Avoda Zara, and the guy went and served it. So it will become aser. That's the halacha that Rav Yudah Mashmul says regarding this brick. So now, what's the ibaya regarding the egg? Seemingly the same halacha should apply. What's the difference if it's an egg or it's a brick? So now the Gemara explains the ibaya of Chizkiah based on what Shmuel said is, should I compare the egg to the brick or not? By the brick, it's very clear that it's put in a funny position. The brick lays flat and he put it in a different position, taller up. So it's clear the Yid is expressing his intent for everyone to see, come, this is Avoda Zara, and serve it. And therefore when the guy does that, it's like the shlichus of the Yid and it becomes aser. But by an egg, you put an egg, you put the egg, it's not, you don't see clearly that he intends that this should be used for Avoda Zara. So it's not the same thing. If the guy bows to it, it won't be aser. Or perhaps I could say that there's no difference. That even by the egg, once the Yid puts it in a position and the guy comes and bows to it, it's like he's doing it with the shlichus of the Yid and it becomes aser. That's the shayla of the Gemara. So regarding this shtickle of the Gemara here, the Rebbe once spoke about this when the Rebbe spoke about the Egel, Aaron HaKohen, what he did. He took the money from the Yidden, and it seems like he was involved in preparing the Egel. And the Rebbe has a ganze pilpul explaining why what Aaron did was not a Isser. And in that Sikha there, the Rebbe discusses this Gemara, and in the Rambam it says that when it says here, Zokaf Levena, and then the guy bowed to it, that it becomes Aser. The pshat that I just said is what it says in Rashi. That the main point here is the fact that the Yid revealed his intent, that he wants it to be served, and the guy is doing what the Yid wanted. So it becomes aser. But the Rambam adds that that's not enough. There's another point here, the zikifa. The fact that he put it in this position, there's a ma'aseh that's being done here. There's an action that's being done. So it's the action that the Yid did, and his intent that he revealed by this. Then if the guy serves it, it'll become aser. So based on this, the Rebbe explains what really the ibaya here is regarding the egg. The Gemara here says that by the egg, you can't necessarily tell, you can't see clearly what the Yid intended to do. But what difference does it make how much you could see? If the fact is that we know that the Yid put it up there in such a way that he wanted it to be served for an Avoda Zara, if the guy bows to it, it should become aser. Elamai, what the Gemara is asking is, by the egg, it's not a significant action. By a brick, you lifting it up, that's a significant action. But an egg is such a minute action, so over here there's a svara to say that if the guy bows to it, it would not become aser. That's the ibaya of the Gemara. That's how the Rebbe explained it according to the Rambam.
It's a minute thing.
Again, the egg, yeah, exactly, that's the point. It's a little, and the Gemara says, Teiku, this remains unresolved. Another ibaya, boy romi bachome, hamashtach velahar, a person that's bowing to a mountain. Right, so it's the case that we're speaking about, that in such a case, regarding the Isser Hana, there's no Isser Hana in such a case. But now the shaila is, Avona, the stones of this mountain, Ma'ala Mizbeach. How about to bring from this to the Mizbeach? Could it be used for the Mizbeach? That's the shaila. So Rashi here explains that the basis of the Gemara shaila is, as mentioned before, when it comes to an animal, a balchai, when it's served as an Avoda Zara, so for any person, it's still mutar b'hana. But for a carbon, the animal becomes pasul as a carbon. So the question of the Gemara is, should we say that just like we find by an animal that there's a difference? For a hedyot, it's mutar, but for the mizbech, it's aser. Maybe I could say the same regarding a rock of a mountain that was served as an Avoda Zara, that for a hedyot it's mutar, but for the mizbeach, it's going to be aser. So the question is, Yesh nevad b'mechuber eitzel gavoya? Is there a status that it takes effect that even though it's connected, it's a rock that was part of the mountain, but for gavoya, for hektish, it has an effect and it becomes aser, similar to the animal? Or it's mechuber, it's different than an animal. It's connected to the ground, and just like by a plain person, even after it's served as an Avoda Zara, it's still mutter. It's the same for a carbon, that the issur will not take effect and it can be used. Now, the Gemara explains, Im Tim Tzaloimar, the shaila over here, there's another step in understanding this shaila. Why? Because now, Im Tim Tzaloimar yesh nevad b'mechuber, if you're going to say that it does take effect, the Issa would take effect, even though it's attached to the ground, Eitz l'gavaya, when it's for a carbon. But the shaila over here is, machshire, carbon, carbon double, when it's something that is being used to prepare for a carbon, is that going to be like the carbon itself? Because what could this stone from a mountain be used for? It's not being used for the carbon itself. It's being used to build in the Beis HaMikdash. So should I say that it'll be like the carbon itself, and therefore it'll be aser? Or I could say, even if you're going to tell me that it would become aser, similar to an animal that served as an Avoda Zara that becomes aser, but that's only because it's mamish a carbon, being brought in the Mizbeach. But over here, since it's only a machsher, it's being used for the Beis HaMikdash, maybe it will not become aser. That's the Ibayah. So Rava says, Kal v'chaymer. I'll prove this to you with the following Kal v'chaymer. Uma esnan. When it comes to an esnan. So esnan is a gift that a person gave to a zaina for a relation with her. He paid her off with this. So whatever item, money, whatever it may be that he used for this. So shemuter betolush lehedyet. This money or this whatever item it may have been, it's mutabano. For any plain individual, it's mutabano. If it's a movable item, cash or whatever else it may be, it's mutter. But aser, even b'mechuber legavoya. But to use this gift or this payoff as a carbon, it's going to be aser. Right, that's the halacha that it says clearly in the title, like Savi Esnan Zaina, you may not bring Esnan Zaina as a carbon. And here the Gemara adds that's even if it's b'mechuber. Even though there's nothing explicit that it says in the Torah about this, but the Gemara is saying this now, since it doesn't say anything in the Torah when it says that the Esnan is forbidden, it doesn't make any distinction, so we're going to assume that if it's mechuber, even if it's a gift that was a piece of property, is also going to be aser to gevaya. Says, do not bring this gift for hektish. Not tolish. There's no distinction in the pasuk made if it's something that is detached, a movable item, and also if it's connected to the ground. So the point here is that regarding esnan, we see that it's aser to be brought to hektish, even if it's mechuber, even if it's connected to the ground. So now, if so, nevad, when it comes to something that's served as an Avoda Zara, which is more chomer than this halacha of esna, because she'aser betolish lehedyet, when something which is detached, any movable item which is served as Avoda Zara is aser for a plain person, it becomes aser b'hana. So since I see that by something that's served as an Avoda Zara is more stringent, so ain't it din? So isn't it a din? I should definitely say she'aser b'mechuber legavaya, that when it's something which is attached to the ground, a rock from a mountain, it should definitely become aser to hektish, to be used for hektish. If by a esnan mechuber becomes aser to hektish, by Avoda Zara it definitely should. That was Rava's Kal v'chaymer. So Rav Yeshua says to Rav that the Kal v'chaymer you just made is based on something that's not written explicitly in the Torah. He made this whole Kal v'chaymer based on the halacha by this gift, by this payoff of the esnan, assuming that you're not allowed to bring the esnan for a carbon, whether it's tolush, whether it's mechuber. Why? Because it didn't say anything explicitly in the Torah. So therefore, Rav Yeshua says, well, since it doesn't say anything there explicitly, so then oichiluf. Maybe turn around the whole Kal v'chaymer in the opposite, which will lead you to a conclusion that by esnan, if it's mechuber, it's actually going to be mutter. And say the Kal v'chaymer as follows: Uma nevad, when it comes to something which was served as an Avoda Zara, she'aser betolosh eitzel hadyet. I see a stringency that if it's a detached item, it becomes aser b'hana for any person. But mutter b'mechuber legavaya. But then I'll assume and say that it will be mutter for hektish. In what case? If it's still mechuber to the ground, because this was our original ibayah here, but it doesn't say anything explicitly in the Torah about this. So I'll assume that it will remain mutter, and I'll use the same pasuk that we quoted before about this. Now the pasuk says, "Eleheyem alaharim v'lo yaharim," that only the Avoda Zara that's on the mountains is aser, but not v'lo yaharim eleheyem. But the mountain itself, it does not become aser. And I would say loishna helehedyet and v'loishna legavaya. This drasha could apply equally whether it's for any person or even for hektish. So I see that even though Avoda Zara is chamor, has a stringency, but yet regarding mechuber, I can say that the Torah is lenient and it'll be mutter at the hektish. So if so, learn out from this. Esnan, shemutter betolish lehedyet, by this payoff for this zaina, that when it's detached, I see that it's more lenient because it's mutter not to any person. Would I not then conclude and say that it should definitely be mutter if it's attached, if it's a gift that's a piece of earth or anything that attached to the ground, that it should be mutter to hektish? Because again, the point here is we have two cases where it doesn't say anything explicitly about this. Both regarding the case of the Esnan, it doesn't say explicitly in the Torah that it includes Tolish and Mechober, and also regarding the case of the heter of Hana, when you serve Avoda Zara for something which is Mechober, it doesn't say explicitly in the Torah whether that heter is only for a hedyet or also for hektish. So therefore, Rav Yeshua says, I can flip the whole Kal V'chomer and say the opposite. I'll use this Kal V'chomer to bring out a leniency regarding the Esnan, that it'll be mutter when it's mechuber lekarka. Now he clarifies further. If you're going to argue and say that you can't say this leniency by an Esnan. Why? Because Mishum, Beis Hashem Elekecha. What does it say by the pasuk of the Esnan? Leisavi Esnan Zayin Mechir Kelev, Beis Hashem Elekecha. So Rashi says that the Gemara is thinking that even though the simple pshat here is, don't bring it into the house of Hashem, but you could also darshan it to mean, don't bring it from a house that you gave as a gift to Hashem. Which would mean that even if it's mechuber, like a house that you gave as a payoff, that can't be brought as a carbon. So how could you say that there's a Kal V'chomer teaching me a leniency that if it's mechuber lekarka, it could be brought? So the Gemara says, well, we don't have to learn Beis Hashem Lekecha this way. Because mibayale, these words, Beis Hashem Lekecha, is teaching something else. Like in the Tanya, as we learned, there's two opinions about this. The Brayser says, when the Torah says Beis Hashem Lekecha, one pshat is that prat lepara she'ena bala beis lebayis. Divrei Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar says that by a para duma, which is not brought in the Beis Hamikdash, is brought in the Har HaZeisim, that's not excluded from it's not usher, that is, to bring from an esnan, because it only says Beis Hashem Lekecha. The Chachamim say lerabais is terikuim. The words Beis Hashem Lekecha is actually coming to add something. That in the Beis Hamikdash they would plate the walls of the Heichal and the Kodesh Kedoshim with gold. Even that plating is also going to be usher to use from this esnan. Okay, so therefore, what's Rav Yeshua's question? You're bringing me a Kal V'chomer to say l'chumre, to learn out that mechuber lekarka by something that was served as Avoda Zara should be usher for hektish. Flip around the Kal V'chomer and say a leniency. That by esnam, by the gift for a zayna, it'll be mutter to bring it as a carbon if the gift was something mechuber lekarka. So Amalei, so Rav responded and said, I'm making this Kal V'chomer using it for astringency. Va'at amrit l'kula, and you're going to flip around the Kal V'chomer and say a leniency. Kula v'chumre, when you have a suffix regarding halacha min ha-Torah, whether you should go lenient or stringent, l'chumre parchinan. We make the Kal V'chomer l'chumre. And Rashi says the term parchinan is a lashon used by a Kal V'chomer. So therefore over here, you're right, it can go both ways, but since we're dealing with a halacha min ha-Torah, so we use the Kal V'chomer to go stringent. That's the rule. So Amalei Rav Papa Rav Papa asked Rav, is that really a rule all over? Anytime you have a Kal V'chomer, they can go two ways, either lenient or stringent. We don't use the Kal V'chomer to go lenient. But here I'll bring you that there's actually a discussion, a machlekes about this. Hazah the Pesach, spraying the blood from the paraduma on a person that's tamei for the carbon Pesach. So this is the case of a person that is a tamei mace, and he has to wait 7 days to become pure. And then on the 7th day, you have to spray the blood of the paradum on him. What happens if the 7th day, which is out of Pesach, is Shabbos? And now on Shabbos, there's an Isser Midrabanan to use the waters of the paraduma to spray this person, because you're being masakin the person. It's like you're fixing him, you're making him tired. So Midrabanan, you can't spray the blood on him, or rather the waters of the paraduma on him. But the question is, will we push off this Isser Midrabanan in order for him to bring the carbon Pesach? Okay, so in this case, the pligi Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva, it seems like Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva are having an argument about this. The Rabbi Eliezer savar l'chumre. Rabbi Eliezer says that we learn the Kal V'chomer l'chumre, v'kama chayev le'legavre, and therefore we say regarding this case that this person is going to have to now bring another carbon Pesach because he can't spray these waters on him today. And how does Rabbi Eliezer learn out this Kal V'chomer? Rabbi Eliezer learns out the Kal V'chomer. He says that. Sorry, one second. Let me explain this again. Rabbi Eliezer says l'chumre. Rabbi Eliezer here says that we go l'chumre, and we're doiche Shabbos. That's actually sorry, I said it wrong before. Let me repeat this again. Rabbi Eliezer says that we learn out the kal v'chaymer l'chumre to say that he will be chayiv in the Korban Pesach. How do we learn out this kal v'chaymer? So Rabbi Eliezer says, if shechita, shechting the Korban Pesach itself, which is esim and atayra, shechita is esim and atayra, but it's mutter to be done on Erev Pesach. So spraying the waters of the para aduma on him should definitely mutter to be done on Erev Pesach if it came out on Shabbos to allow him to bring the Korban Pesach. That's how Rabbi Eliezer darshans is drasha. And so, which means that this is the Gemara says that this is a stringency because we're obligating this person to bring the Korban Pesach. And Rabbi Akiva l'kol upatar, but Rabbi Akiva flips around the kal v'chaymer. And he says, no, I can take the same information that you use in your kal v'chaymer, and I'll say the kal v'chaymer in the opposite. As the Gemara here brings the Mishnah in Masechta Pesachim. V'kaparach Rabbi Akiva l'kol. Rabbi Akiva says, let's learn the kal v'chaymer and go lenient. Because it's not the Mishnah there said, hey Shiv Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva answered, Rabbi Eliezer, and he said, oy chiluf, the same kal v'chaymer you learned from shchita to hazah, let's flip it around and say as follows. If when it comes to spraying these waters on this person, it will not push off Shabbos, so then maybe I should go so far to say that shechita, shechting the carbon of the Korban Pesach when it falls out on Shabbos, definitely it should also be usher to bring the Korban Pesach when Erev Pesach comes out on a Shabbos. So here we see that Rabbi Akiva was arguing that you have this option of making the kal v'chaymer l'kola or l'chumre, and Rabbi Akiva is arguing that let's go l'chumre in this kal v'chaymer. So the Gemara answers, no, that's not the understanding of what Rabbi Akiva said. This is a very interesting thing, that because the emes is Rabbi Akiva never argued in Rabbi Eliezer. Rather, he was really trying to make another point here to Rabbi Eliezer. Hasam, over there, what happened was Rabbi Eliezer, Gemara v'iyakile Talmuda. Rabbi Eliezer, he himself taught Rabbi Akiva this halacha that the hazah is asr. It's asr to be done for this person to bring the Korban Pesach. But then he got sick, and he forgot things that he taught him. Rabbi Akiva was actually a student by Rabbi Eliezer, and he forgot things that he taught him. And v'asar Rabbi Akiva lad kure. Rabbi Akiva wanted to come and remind him. I saw Rabbi Akiva, he's a student of his. He didn't want to come and tell him clearly that you yourself taught me that it's asr. So, but he wanted to say something that would hopefully remind him. And so therefore, what did Rabbi Akiva do? The Gemara here doesn't bring the whole continuation of the story, but in the Gemara in Pesachim it says that what did Rabbi Akiva do? He went and took that same kal v'chaymer that Rabbi Eliezer said, and he said, let's flip it around and say that if the hazah is aser, for sure, shchita is aser. And Rabbi Akiva that is, was hoping that this will remind Rabbi Akiva that the hazah is definitely aser. Because you see, Rabbi Akiva is using that point as the basis for a kal v'chaymer to go so far to say that the shechita would be aser. But what happened is, over there, the Gemara says that Rabbi Eliezer still didn't remind himself what he taught Rabbi Akiva. And not only that, Rashi here brings that Rabbi Eliezer said a very sharp thing to Rabbi Akiva. He says to Rabbi Akiva, you want to come and aser the shechita of the Korban Pesach on Erev Shabbos? How can you say such a thing? We have a drasha b'mayadai that the Korban Pesach has to be brought on its time on Shabbos. And he told Rabbi Akiva, because you're arguing with me regarding this shechita, you yourself in the end will be harmed by this, by shechita. And he said Rabbi Akiva later was from the Asara Haruge Malchus. Okay, and then the Gemara goes on to say, we see clearly that Rabbi Akiva didn't mean to argue with Rabbi Eliezer. He just meant to remind him. And v'hainu da'am alei, this is what Rabbi Akiva then tells his teacher, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi, al tachmireni b'sha'as sadin. Don't argue with me when we're having this discussion. Because I actually learned from you yourself that hazah shvus, that hazah is taka only asam d'Rabbanan. But it will not push off Shabbos. So we see from the whole conclusion of the discussion that Rabbi Akiva, in the end, he had to tell him clearly. He was trying to remind him, but in the end, he told him clearly that you yourself taught me that it's a Shavuos and it's not Doiches Shabbos. So therefore, we have no question on this rule that the Gemara brings here. Anytime you have a kal v'chaymer for something menatayah which can go l'kol or l'chumre, we actually dashen it l'chumre, not l'kola. That's the conclusion of the singing here in the Gemara.